Imagine if today God could speak to you and you heard his voice. And imagine what that would do in your life. Because when that happened in my life, everything changed. This is Father Mark, and as we are talking on these Tuesdays about prayer, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about a particular form of prayer, a style of prayer, a method of prayer called Lectio Divina, a way of praying with a Bible passage and allowing yourself to apply that to your life and allowing the Lord to speak to you about that. So far, we've talked about 2 steps, right? Let's quickly walk through those, right? The first step was the Lectio piece, where we read a passage of Scripture, just getting familiar with it and finding a word or phrase that speaks to us. Step 2, which was last week, we had that conversation about how we then apply that to our life. That's the meditation or the meditatio piece of Scripture, praying with the Scriptures. And last week, I was even giving an example of how I prayed with Psalm 37. Verse 4 was the piece of Scripture that spoke to me, and then I applied it to my life. And last week I shared with you, it was because I really have desires in my heart. And while I want to reconnect with my family at this time of year, what I really want to know is, where has God been in some of the struggles that I've had in this 2017 year? And step 3 of Lectio Divina, that's what the Catechism defines as oratio, and that is praying, just talking to God. One of my favorite passages from Scripture is when it says that Moses used to speak to the Lord as one man speaks to another. And prayer is actually just as easy as that. It's you and I having a conversation with God as one person speaks to another. God is real. He's really listening. He's active and alive. And even though sometimes we don't have confirmation or indication that he's listening to us, I can just promise you God is listening to us. In fact, as we get ready for Thanksgiving and look at Christmas around the corner, the reason God came at Christmas is so that we would know his name and we would have a face and we would have some type of physical evidence and assurance that God is real and he wants to be involved in our life. So step 3 of Lectio Divina, you're going to talk to God because he is real and he is personable. In fact, I was doing that as I was praying with Psalm 37. I told God, I said, God, look, my heart's desires, I want to know, where are you? Where have you been in some of the struggles that I've had in 2017? And so I didn't think about that. I didn't think about what I would say to God. I actually just said it in silence of my heart. Just knowing that God was listening, I said, God, I want to know where you have been. And then I listened for God's response. That's a really important part of Lectio Divina. You want to be able to listen to God's responding to us. How is it that God speaks to us? Well, sometimes God's going to speak to us through our thoughts. Now, look, there's some times that I think thoughts, and I know that I'm the one driving the thought. I woke up this morning and I said to myself, I have to brush my teeth and take a shower and put on some clothes and go to the office, and I know that I am the one that's pushing the thought. And sometimes thoughts just pop up in my head, and I know that I'm not the one that was driving the thought. And if that thought is consistent with the Scripture or is consistent with church teaching, if that thought leads me into a deeper relationship with God, if that thought has a sense of peace with it and that peace stays over an extended period of time, then that thought is God speaking to you. Sometimes God will speak to us as he has already spoken. That is in a Scripture passage. And so sometimes I am led back to reading a text or a line from Scripture. Those words, that's God saying something to me, right? Sometimes God will speak to me in a memory. I'm just automatically remember something that he has said in the past. Sometimes it's a song. I have lots of songs that are favorites, and sometimes a line will just kind of pop up. And sometimes God will speak to us just in our bodies. Maybe there's a sense of warmth or peace, or maybe there's a sense of desire that leaps up in our heart. All of those are ways that God speaks back to us. So I was praying with Psalm 37. Check this out. And I had said to the Lord, where are you? And you want to know what I heard? Nothing. I had to wait. And I just offer that as an encouragement, because sometimes you're going to pray and maybe the answer is not going to come immediately. So I just stayed there and I waited and I waited. And I was reminded of something that God said to me. And it actually comes from scriptures. It comes from Jeremiah chapter 29, where God says that when we seek him with all our heart, he will let himself be found. And I was reminded, as I was just kind of patiently waiting, of so many times in 2017 that God opened a door. God came through when I needed him to come through. And it didn't come through on my timing or the way or how I thought, but yet God always came through. And so it was God speaking to me through my memory of all the times that God came through, and yet it happened in ways that I never would have thought of. Just want to offer a word of encouragement to you if that's where you are in life. If you just need God to come through, maybe even especially at this time of year, just want you to be patient. Just wait. The Lord's going to come through on his timing and in his way. But as we wait on him, let's learn to listen to him in all the ways he speaks to us. Come on back next week. We'll talk about that last step of Lectio Divina, which is just resting in the Lord. Until we see you again, have a great Thanksgiving if that's where the Lord has you at this time of year. And continue to listen to the Lord who wants to speak to our hearts. God bless you.